Welcome to our course on understanding Einstein, the special theory of relativity. I'm Larry Lagerstrom. I'm an academic director and historian of science at Stanford University. And in this brief video clip, I want to give you 3 reasons why you should consider taking this course. You may know that every year Time magazine chooses a person of the year. And a few years back, at the turn of the century, from the 20th century into the 21st century, they decide they should choose a person of the century. And of all the significant figures they considered for that honor, the one they ended up choosing was Albert Einstein. And on the face of it, this is really a remarkable decision because Einstein, he was a theoretical physicist. He dealt with very abstract, very abstruse matters. And yet, just to be in the conversation for an honor such as the person of the century means that this is somebody we should really know a little bit more about. So let's say that's our first reason for considering taking this course. So number 1, person of the century. Again, somebody you should know something more about. Number 2, we'll call this the miracle year of 1905. And in 1905, Einstein had maybe the greatest year any scientist has ever had. And at the time, he was only 26 years old. Of all things, he was a patent clerk at the Swiss Patent Office. He essentially was a failed academic. He graduated from university in 1900, tried to get a job as a physics assistant at a university, had failed in that, tried to get a job teaching physics, wasn't able to find a position of that even at a high school level, and therefore eventually he was able to find a job at the Swiss Patent Office. And in 1905, he published 5 papers, almost any one of which could have made his career as a physicist and his name. To give you an idea, one of those 5 papers dealt with the quantum nature of light, really introduced the idea that light maybe was more than just a wave, which was well accepted by that time, but that it had particle-like aspects to it. So really that was the paper that kicked off what later became known as the quantum revolution in physics in the 20th century. So that in itself, and it was a very controversial idea at the time and for a number of years after that as well. So that was one paper. Another paper he wrote showed that there was really convincing evidence that atoms existed. And you might say, well, people have thought about atoms for centuries, actually. But up until that time, even in the era of 1900 or so, it was debated whether these entities actually existed. We could never see them probably, and therefore, were they even proper to talk about scientifically? And he showed theoretically that there was good, solid evidence that atoms existed. And then another paper was his famous E equals mc squared paper, introducing probably the most famous equation in all of science, really. And yet another paper was what later became known as the special theory of relativity. And that's going to be the topic of our course. We want to figure out, what was it about Einstein that enabled him to come up with some of these ideas. And in particular, the special theory of relativity, he really transformed our understanding of space and time. That perhaps time isn't different for one person compared to another person. Just the ticking off of clocks can change. Length, measuring lengths can be different. How can a length be one thing for one person and yet another thing for another person? And so on and so forth. So this miracle year of 1905, that in itself would make Einstein obviously a suitable topic for further understanding, further delving into exactly how this occurred and what the concepts were and what the implications were. So, miracle year of 1905. At this point, too, perhaps just interject because some of you may be asking the question, well, is there any math involved here? Do I have to know any math? And the answer is actually both yes and no. In this course, we will be going into a little bit of the math of the special theory of relativity. The good news is that it's pretty much just basic algebra. But even for those of you who perhaps are very rusty with that, aren't quite sure you want to get into that. The better news, perhaps, is that we're going to have 3 approaches to the course. One approach that you can choose to take is a more quantitative approach, and that will involve math at the level of algebra, and also weekly problem sets. Second approach, however, is a more qualitative approach, where you won't have to actually do any math yourself, perhaps follow along a little bit, but then also have the assignment of a creative project involving the young Einstein and or perhaps a special theory of relativity. And so we'll talk more about that creative project later on in the course. So those are 2 approaches, the more quantitative approach, the more qualitative approach. Third approach is simply an auditing approach where there aren't any required assignments for the course, but you can follow along in the footsteps of Einstein, as it were, which we'll be trying to do, and get out of the course what you want with that. So 3 approaches to the course. So, person of the century, miracle year of 1905. Number 3 here, we'll just list it as a quote. As you may know, there are quotes by Einstein all over the place, all over the internet. You see them all the time. Actually, many of them are fake quotes. Einstein didn't say what he supposedly said. Sometimes it's something he might have said, but never actually quite said it that way. But this quote I want to tell you about is definitely something Einstein said. And he said, the important thing is not to stop questioning. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. Emphasizing curiosity here. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. He said, one cannot help but be in awe when one contemplates the mystery of eternity, of life, of the marvelous structure of reality. Okay? The mystery of the marvelous structure of reality. And then he went on to say, it is enough if one tries to comprehend only a little of this mystery every day. Okay? The mystery of the marvelous structure of reality, it's enough just to comprehend only a little bit of this mystery every day. If you aspire to be that sort of person, if you are that sort of person, then this is the course for you, because that's exactly what we'll be trying to do. We'll be trying to lift the veil a little bit on that marvelous structure of reality and the mystery of it, and follow in the footsteps of Einstein in these revolutionary ideas that he introduced, especially in the miracle year of 1905, and see how he came about it, learn a little bit about Einstein himself, and also exactly what are the implications of some of these ideas. So I hope you'll join us in this course.